And hi, everybody. Welcome. Good luck if you've got your test coming up very soon. Can I just say again what Jamie said? Because there's still quite a few of you that have just got panelists. That means only Jamie and myself can read what you're saying. So could you please add attendees? Otherwise, a lot of my comments are going to not really make any sense because you won't have seen what other people have written. Okay. So what we're going to do today is look at the writing task 1. And we're going to look at the describing a process. So this is the academic module, okay? And we're going to look at how to structure your answer, how to write all of the different sections of the task 1 as required by the examiners. And we're also going to look at some of the kinds of language that you might want to use when you're doing this, okay? So what we've got here is our example. You can see the question and you can see the diagram showing the process. So a little bit of information to begin at the beginning. The purpose of this is to describe the diagram. It's usually some kind of manufacturing process where there's an end product, or the other option is that it could be a natural cycle. But most commonly it's a manufacturing process. The task 1, minimum 150 words, okay? Very important to write at least 150 words. There's no maximum, but you don't want to also write that much more than 150. The suggestion is to try and stick to 20 minutes for task 1. That's because it's worth less than task 2 and it's also shorter. So you really need that 40 minutes for the task 2 and 20 minutes only for the task 1. Okay. And the point of the task 1 is you're going to summarize the key features, and then you are also going to give the details of each of the steps within that process. Okay. So it's always a good idea to spend a couple of minutes looking at the diagrams before you start. Sometimes they can look a bit confusing, but actually once you look at them and once you think about it, it's okay. So do that before you start writing. And let's think about what we can see here. Okay, so what is being described in this diagram? What are we looking at here? Just put your answers in the chat. What do you think? What are we looking at here? What kind of manufacturing? Okay, good. Cement production and also concrete production. Okay, so we've got almost two processes being talked about here. Okay. And is it a linear process? Does it have a start and a finish, or is it a cyclical process? Is it one where it continues all the time? Okay, very good, Marat. This is a linear process. So we have a starting point and we have an end point. Okay, yes, the first one, Amir, exactly, yes, linear. And how many steps can you see there altogether? Steps within the processes. So let's look at cement production first. How many steps can you see in that one? Yeah, I think we can say that there's 4 or 5. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah. Okay, right, yes. And then in concrete production, how many steps have we got there? Okay, so we're adding it and then we're turning it, and then we have the final one. So yeah, you could call it 2 or 3 steps. Okay, so just sort of note down what the different steps are. What's the very first step in cement production? What's the very first thing you can see happening there? Okay, yeah, very good. So there's a crushing process. We're adding the limestone and clay and we're crushing it. Okay, that's very good, Jithin. And what's our final step? What's the last thing that you can see? Okay, I mean, in the concrete production, what's the last step in the concrete production? Okay, you're right. Bagging is the last step in cement production. And in the concrete production, yes, we got the mixing going. We can see the circular movement there in the mixer. Okay, so these are all of the things that you want to have a look at before you start writing. It's going to make your writing a lot simpler. Okay, with the process, what kind of tense are we going to use? Okay. What kind of tense are we going? Okay, yeah, so simple tense and present tense, like, very good. Because this is a continuous process. This is a regular process. So yeah, present simple and Farshad, I group, you're already ahead of us. So passive voice, okay? We're not interested in who is doing this. We're interested in the product. And therefore we need to use the passive voice. If you're doing a manufacturing process, it's pretty much everything is going to be in the passive, okay? And all of the tasks, all of the processes are going to be in the present simple, all right? So let's look at our stages. So we're going to look at the structure of the task one, and then I'm going to ask you what you put in each of those elements. Okay, so we have 3 different parts to the task one. We have introduction, overview, and then we have the body, which we tend to divide into 2 paragraphs. That just makes it easier for the examiner to see it. So what are we going to put in the introduction? What's the key information that the examiner wants to see in the introduction? Okay, very good. Nahasang, what's a paraphrase? Paraphrase of what? What's the purpose there? Okay, yeah, paraphrasing the question. Very good, Marat. Yeah, so we're introducing the topic of this diagram. What is it describing? Okay, exactly, Vo. What is the process about, or a paraphrase of the question? Very good, Vishal. What about in the overview? What are we going to put in the overview? Okay, very good, Hadia. The main points, and Hassan, the number of steps, okay, or the number of stages. Okay, very good. So yeah, a summary of the key steps. Okay, oops, gone ahead a bit. And yeah, putting the first and the last step in is a very good idea in the overview. So what are we going to put in the body? Okay, very good, Anna. Yeah, we're going to look at the details. Okay, an explanation of the details. So each of the steps in turn, you're not going to leave anything out with the process. You're going to talk about every single step that is shown in the diagram. Okay, and that's going to be the same for both the body paragraphs. It's just, you know, to divide them up makes it easier for the examiner to read it. And one of the key pieces of language that they're looking for here for the process is sequencing words. So various linking phrases that you're going to use to show that you're going from one step to the other. Okay. So that's your overall structure for the process question. Okay. So we're going to look now at each of those parts in turn, and we're going to write a process answer together. Okay, so here's our example again, the cement and concrete production, and here's our task question as well. So as a lot of you said, the introduction is really paraphrasing the questions. So what are the different ways that we can paraphrase? Quite a few different things that we can use. Okay, very good. So synonyms is a good one. Vo, you're right. And Murat as well. You can change the order of the words, the order of the sentence. We can change the voice from active to passive or passive to active. That's right. Yeah, and you can change the word formation through. Very good. So we can use, instead of using a noun, we might use a verb or an adjective. Okay, so synonyms are really important, but it's not the only way to paraphrase. You can paraphrase the grammar as well. Very good. Okay, Sandeep, you're ahead of us there. So synonyms and grammar transformation is very important. Okay. Some other advice related to the introduction: keep it short, keep it very precise. You're not going to go into any detail here. It's really just going to be one sentence, which gives you the topic of the diagram. That's it. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Reveals, and then you're going to have to keep going there. So we're going to do some practice of paraphrasing now. Yes, you're right, Vishal. Really, maximum would be 2 sentences, but you know, often 1 is enough. I would keep the overview and the introduction separate, Farshad. So write your introduction in 1 paragraph, write your overview in a 2nd paragraph. We're going to look at that in a minute, and then write your body in separate paragraphs. Okay. So let's practice some paraphrasing. So in the question, let's say, for example, they put the word shows. So what could we put in our introduction where we wouldn't be using the same word? Okay, so illustrates is a very nice word to use. Yeah, I think that's the one that we used. Depicts as well is a very nice one too. Okay. And then our next one is stages. So, okay, very good, Sky, you're ahead of us there. So steps would be another way of saying stages. Phases is another possibility. We wouldn't really say indicates for shows. It's not quite right in this step. Yes, Armstrong, exactly, steps or phases. And then here we've got the cement making process. So, okay, very nice. So we can use production, manufacture is another good way that you can talk about it. Yeah. So same information, but we've used lots of different words there to make sure that we're not using the words in the question at all. Okay. Okay, and then we move on to the next part. So when we use the cement, very important that you can see that. So we're using the cement in the 2nd process. That's part of what you have to explain. So then it is used, we need another word. Okay, yes, so we can use manufacture rather than produce. And rather than building purposes, what could we use? What would be a synonym or a paraphrase for building purposes? Okay, very good, Nagmed. Construction would be a great way. That's what we've used as well, or for the construction industry. Hi, Arakan. Yeah, so we've got the same information, but we haven't used any of those keywords, and we've shown that we really understand, we can manipulate the language, which is really what they're looking for. Okay. Oh, I quite like infrastructure. That's very nice. Okay, so that's your introduction. Keep it simple. You shouldn't really be spending much time on the introduction at all. Just get that down as quickly as you can. Overview, however, is very, very important. Okay, this is one of the key parts of the task 1. Got to have a good overview. So we're going to look a little bit at the band descriptors here. This is the descriptions of each of the band scores, which the examiners use to assess your writing and to give you the band score. So if we look at the band 5 here, where it says about the overview, so no clear overview. So this means you haven't put it in a separate paragraph. That's very, very important. You know, maybe you haven't used the word overall to introduce it. So very important to use the word overall to show that this is the overview. And also, if you haven't separated out the detail from the main trends or the key information, that also means that there's no clear overview. So very important, details in one section and main trends, key features in a separate section, which is the overview. Okay. And then if we go up to a 7, so a clear overview, separate paragraph beginning with overall, and the main trends, differences or stages. Yeah, so that's the overview that we're looking at there. Something else to look at, if we go back to the band 5, if you look at the first thing that it says is recounts detail mechanically. Okay, these are relevant to all the task ones for academic. And mechanically means that you just list the steps, or you list the information without using any structures to talk about it. Yeah, so it would just be step 1 is this, step 2 is that. Okay, no language, no manipulation of the structures. So make sure that you're using complex sentences, that you're using, you know, different types of structures, interesting ways of conveying this information, not just mechanical detail when you come to the body. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to do for the overview. We're going to follow the same example that we were looking at before. So you summarize the key stages by saying how many stages. A lot of people mentioned that before, so very good. And say what is the first stage and say what is the last stage specifically. So you're talking about it going from this point to this point. Okay, so let's have a look at that in more detail. Another thing which is important, particularly for the process, it's important, is what's the purpose? So what's the end product? What do we have when we finish this process? Okay, so let's look at what we're doing here. So we've got some missing words. So what is missing from there? Yeah, okay, Sky's got that very quick. Yeah, okay, very good. In order to make cement. Okay, and then key information is the number of raw ingredients that we're looking at. Okay, so 2 raw ingredients, which is limestone and clay. And then, oh, I've just given you that information, sorry about that. Yeah, so limestone and clay, so you can mention them specifically. And then they are processed in how many stages? So remember, these are all of the things that we looked at before. Okay, we've got 4 stages. So maybe there's one that you might want to split up, but say 4 to 5, yes, I mean, okay. Before being, so what's the final stage? What do we have at the end of it? Okay, very good. Yeah, at the end of it, we're going to have it bagged. Okay. I wouldn't worry about that too much, Farshad. I mean, as long as you're not saying 20 when it's 4, or, you know, 1 when it's 4, but you know, so in some cases there could be one part where some people think that's 2 stages, some people consider that to be 1 stage, so don't panic too much with that. Okay, then what happens? We bag the cement and then we can, okay, very good, yeah. Okay, so it's then mixed. So now we're moving on to the second picture, or, you know, yeah, blended would be fine. In specific proportions. So we don't have to name the proportions, but we can say that there are specific proportions with how many other materials? Okay, very good. Yeah, water, sand, and gravel. So again, we're just saying the numbers. And we have our end product, we have our purpose. So that is to produce concrete. Okay. So 2 sentences for the overview. This one's a little bit more complicated, so it's here you're probably going to use 2. In other types of process, you might just have 1 sentence. Okay, but we've got the number of stages, we've got the beginning, we've got the end, and we've got the purpose of the manufacturing process. Okay, so then we need to move on to the body paragraphs. So we've got our introduction and we've got our overview. So now we need to look at the 2 body paragraphs. Okay, so in that case, what we're doing with the body paragraphs is going through each step in turn. Okay. The other thing you have to remember for the body is that if there's any other information on the pictures, you need to include it. So in this case, we've got the percentages when we look at the concrete production. Other types of processes, sometimes you have temperatures, if something's being heated. Sometimes you have periods of time, if something is being grown or something like that. So anything which is on the picture, make sure that you include it in the body. That's part of the detail that they are looking for, okay? The other thing that is really, really important is that you're clearly distinguishing each step, one from the other. So you can talk about the first step, then you have a range of expressions to move through the process, and then you have a linking phrase for the final step, okay? It's IELTS, therefore it's very important to not repeat the same words. You don't want to be saying then. That shows just a very limited resource of vocabulary. So you've got to make sure that you have a good range of phrases that you can use to talk about the different, yes, for example, subsequently, Sandy, different range of phrases to talk about those stages. In some cases, you have two simultaneous processes, which maybe end together, or halfway through, they become two separate processes. So you would want to have, you really two phrases for the first step as well, and two for the last step, just in case that comes up, okay? But mainly, you're going to need a range of phrases for the middle steps, okay? So let's have a look at what else. So as we mentioned before, not interested in the person doing this, we're interested in the product. So passive voice is going to be very, very important here. You're going to use always passive voice. There's not really any situation where you would be using active voice. Don't worry, Anoop, we are coming to that now. Okay, we're going to do an example. You'll see all of those phrases, okay? So make sure you know how to use the passive voice. The good thing is it's only going to be in the present tense, so you've only got to learn one form of it. But some of those past participles, sometimes the irregular ones are a bit tricky, so make sure that you've got all of those irregular past participles with you, okay? And make sure, like I said, it's not mechanical, so change things around, use, maybe a relative clause, use different conjunctions, make sure that your sentences are not the same format. You're not just using and or something like that, but you're moving all the way through with different types of sentences and structures. That is very important. Remember, the marking criteria is grammatical range and accuracy. So they're looking for a range of sentence forms, not just accurate grammar, okay? So let's see if we can do that. So in this case, we're going to have a few of those difficult past participles going on here, maybe difficult, maybe not. So we've actually written out the first paragraph, the first body. If there is an obvious place to go from the first paragraph to the second place, then make sure you follow that. Here it's quite clear we've got two pictures, so we can have one paragraph for the first one, and then we can have one paragraph for the second one. But, find some kind of logical place to split up your answer into two paragraphs, possibly even three paragraphs. It does make it easier for the examiner to read it, okay? So you've all gone ahead of me now, yeah? So we've got the words down on the left-hand side, but we've got to put them in the right form. And as a lot of people have put very, very correctly, after involve, we must use an ing form, okay? So correct, crushing the clay and the limestone into a powder, as you can see the next bit. Then what happens to the powder? Okay, yeah, these two next gaps, those are kind of two gaps together. So is then what? We don't really want to say mix. Remember, we got the words here. Okay, Farshad's there, very good. Is then, okay, we can put combined in a mixture. You know, there are different words that you can use, but then you can, you've got the right form, which is the present simple passive form. Okay, so combined into a mixture. You could put into a mixture or pass through a mixer. Those would all work as well. But don't use mixed, because then you got mixed and mixer, and you're not, you know, changing the verbs enough. Okay. Okay. Then this powder, what happens next? Okay, very good. Is passed through a rotating heater. Okay, before, think about your past tenses there. Being, you're right with the being. Grind is irregular. Anybody give me the correct past participle for grind? No. This is a very tricky one. What do you, Sky, thank you very much. Think about coffee. What do we have? We have ground coffee. So before being ground into cement. So that is one of those tricky past participles that comes up. Okay. I think somebody asked a question a little just a bit. I think you could say this powder, you could say it passes through a rotating heater. In that case, I think that would work fine as well. Okay, and then the final product, what can we put there? Okay, is put, is packed, works very well, as that's great, yeah. Okay, into bags ready for use. And also remember that, because this is a mistake I've seen quite a few times, when you've got that movement like put, remember to use into or possibly onto, like, you know, the bags are loaded onto lorries. So we got a movement, so we don't really want just in or on, we want into and onto. Stick with the present simple, Amir. You don't really want to use any other tenses. Okay, so just put it as the present tense all the way through, and only simple forms. You don't want to use any continuous forms. Okay. So you can see there that, you know, we've used the passive, but we've also used other forms of the verb. You know, we've used them after other verbs. We've used them as gerunds after before. Okay, so we're not just repeating the same form all the time. Okay, let's look a little bit more at the language here. So what linking expressions, what sequencing words can you see there? We don't want to have bit, we just is put Armstrong, yeah. Okay, very good. So we got the first stage, yeah. And then we've got which, okay, and then, which works very nicely. Okay, very good. Then we've got before. So remember, after before, we're going to use an ing form. And then what else? Yes, okay, good. The final product. Okay, so good range of phrases there. When we move on to the next one, we're going to have some different ones. Okay. So sorry, I'll just go back so you can see that a bit more. So make sure you're not repeating any of those sequencing expressions. Make sure you've got enough that you can talk about a process with maybe 12 steps. That happens quite often. It might have 10, 12, 15 steps in it. You've got to have enough phrases to be able to combine those steps in different ways without repeating anything. Okay, so second paragraph. Okay, so again, as I said, clearly we've got a division here between cement production and concrete production. So that's a very good place to start our second paragraph. And then you're going to carry on and you're going to talk specifically about each of those stages in the second process, including all of the detail that you can see on the picture there. So that would be the percentages in this case, okay? So as it says, any quantities given, include them, temperatures given, include them, periods of time given, include them as well. Might not be complete if you're not doing that. Okay, so we've got our bagged cement now. So now what are we going to do? Okay, very good, to produce concrete. Okay, and we've got very nice. Once is a very nice one to use if you want to use that. So yeah, so to produce concrete, to manufacture concrete. Okay, the cement is added. So we've got another passive there. We're going to look at the language in a moment. To a large machine. What happens when the cement is added? What else would we want to add then? What would be the next thing to talk about after you've added the cement? Okay, yeah, okay, like farshad, and yes, you've all got it. So we're going to talk about the other things that we're going to put into the mix. Okay, first we're going to give the name of the machine. So what's the name of the machine? Okay, yeah, good. The concrete mixer. Okay, so again, it's down there on the diagram, so it's good to get it into your description. Don't leave anything out. And somebody else put with the other ingredients. You can also say along with or together with. And yes, we have 3 other ingredients. Okay, but this is the body, so we need to go into the detail with the body. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so we're going to talk about the quantities. So what is the word for small stones? Okay, very good, Din. So the gravel accounts for how much? Yes, you could write 3, or you could write it as a number or as a word. That would be fine for the task 1. Yeah, accounts for 50%, or yes, Swang did it. Half is also a possibility. Quite nice to use a fraction instead of a percentage if you want to. So that's what we've done. Remember, it's easy to write the percentage, but if you use a fraction, you're using language. So that is going to make a better impression on the examiner than if you are just copying out the percentages, okay? At least in some of the cases, okay? All right, and then we have the other ones. So we're just listing these. Accounts for half of the mixture. What's going to be the next one? Think about how we're linking this information together. I think you're missing a word. Okay, yeah, so we're having a contrast here. So we've got while or whereas. Yeah, very good, Ijachi. While would be perfect. Yeah, percentage is fine. Again, you can write the symbol or you can write the word. That's not going to be a problem. Yeah, and then we have sand, cement, and water. Okay, with the specific quantities there. So we're not missing anything out in that case. Okay. So that's very important. And then again, we want to go right to the end. What do we get at the end? So the mixer, be specific about the movement. What is the mixer doing? Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay, good. Spin, rotates, works very, very well. We could say, yes, spins works as well. But very important, that's something that is on the diagram, so make sure that you put it in your description, okay? You could say spins or turns as well. Rotates is a bit more kind of technical, so that works very well. Okay, to combining these materials, and then how are we going to finish our second body paragraph? Okay, okay. Finally, or ultimately, a little bit more high level, so that works very nicely. Producing concrete, okay? So you got all of the information there. So, you know, do make sure there's nothing you leave out. If there's any kind of arrows, any kind of movement, that is something that you need to include as well, okay? So, I can leave this on here for a little bit. This is the full answer. So we have our introduction, we have our overview, and we have 2 body paragraphs with the detail. Notice they're all in separate paragraphs with a line gap in between. So it's very, very clear. You can see exactly where you are with all of those different things. Okay. And just a few tips. So as I said, think about it first, look at it, think about the main trends, the details, make some notes. Don't start writing straight away. Sometimes it goes a bit crazy. Keep it to 20 minutes, very, very important. Okay. Don't waste time counting your words in the exam. Okay. You really don't have time for that. Practice writing answers before you do the exam. Count your words then, and then see what it looks like. If you can visualize what 150 words looks like in your handwriting, then you can just do it in the exam and you don't need to count the words. Okay. And again, you can download the actual answer sheet that is used in IELTS. So if you handwrite on that, then you're going to know exactly what it looks like and where you need to get to on that piece of paper to have done 150 words. Yeah. Okay. And practice, practice, practice. Cover as many different processes as you can and all of the other types of task 1. Okay. The more practice you do, the quicker you're going to be, the easier you're going to find it in the actual exam. Okay. Thank you, Jamie.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Annelie. Amazing presentation. Thank you for talking us through that. And well done, everyone, for providing such great answers. You guys did really well. So we will have some time now to look at some of your questions. I've been answering some of them in the Q&A as the presentation was going. So I hope some of you got some of the answers you were looking for there. If you do have more questions, could you put them over into the Q&A just now? We'll focus on the questions in the Q&A first, and then if we have time, we'll discuss the ones in the chat. Annelie, I just wanted to check, can you see the Q&A, or is it just visible for me at the moment?
I can't see it. No, I can only see the chat.
Well, that's fine. If I do cut out or something happens to me, you can go into the chat, okay? But for now,
right.
with the Q&A ones. So,
okay, perfect.
Before we do discuss your questions, though, I would just like to quickly mention the premium services that we offer on our website, IELTSonlinetest.com. You can see the link to them up on the screen there. I've also put the links in the chat. We offer a speaking and a writing evaluation service where you can spend time with a speaking or writing examiner. They will give you very detailed feedback on your writing, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what you can do to improve your score. So that is a helpful resource. It's available on our website. The link for that is in the chat. We also have our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. So if you could check them out, you can see all the recordings of our previous webinars. They're online on our YouTube channel. So if you could take a look, subscribe if you like it, share with your friends, that will really help us to keep offering these webinars for free. So excellent. The one thing I'd like to mention as well is that next week we have a special webinar coming up for Vietnamese students. It's going to be presented in Vietnamese language. So if the presenter is really an amazing IELTS expert, she is Vietnamese herself. She lives in San Francisco in California, and she's been training people in IELTS for many years. She has a huge following on social media and is excellent presenter. She'll be able to guide you through how to write an agree-disagree essay in Vietnamese, which I think can help you to understand it very, very clearly. This is a paid webinar. It's available at the link. I've just posted that in the chat. So take a look if you're interested in that. Okay, so guys, that's true, Farshad. It would be excellent if it was free. Also, unless you speak Vietnamese, don't sign up for it, okay? It is only for people who speak Vietnamese. So don't want you to waste your money there, okay? So, good stuff. All right. Yeah, fair enough. So, okay. So,
Free if you don't speak Vietnamese.
yeah, would be useful. So I think we can take a look at some of these questions, Annelie, that are in the Q&A. The first one, and I wasn't sure about this, it's from Devashish. Devashish is asking, can I write my answers in capital letters, like block capitals? Would they be penalized for that?
If it's clear, I don't think that's a problem. If you find that easier to write, I mean, I usually think it's quicker to write in small letters. But yeah, as long as it's clear, as long as it's legible, and you're following all of the other rules, then that should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Question from Heba here. They would like to know the impact of spelling mistakes. So if I have some spelling mistakes, how much will it minimize my score in the writing task?
Yeah, so part of the lexical resource marking criteria, so that's the vocabulary marking criteria, is correct spelling. They make a distinction between spelling which actually causes some problems for the person reading it or is very frequent, which would definitely mean that you would lose quite a lot of marks. Going up to maybe just a couple of spelling mistakes and spelling mistakes that are quite small ones which don't really interfere with the message. So, you know, even at band 7, you might be making, you know, 1 or 2 very small mistakes. So that really depends. And it's, you know, it's part of the whole vocabulary section. It's just one thing that they're looking at. And the overall idea is, how much is this affecting the message? Is it making it difficult for the person reading to understand what you're saying? Or can they still understand it easily? And that's really the biggest difference. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Indurthi, I could say, welcome back. It's good to see you. I could see you've got a couple of questions about other task 1 question types. So things like answering a bar chart, describing a line graph, a pie chart, a table. That's a very big topic. We have covered it before in previous webinars. So if you would like to take a look on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to find the previous webinars that we've done on these topics. And we give very detailed instruction on each of those question types. So you can take a look on our YouTube channel there. A question here from Amin. What does it mean to make a plane? To make a plane?
A plan.
A plan.
Make a
Okay.
plane.
There you go.
And a paper.
I think so. Paper plane. Yeah.
Yeah. Making a plan. So that means, yeah, don't start writing straight away. Okay, always spend a couple of minutes looking at the process or you know, looking at the bar chart or line graph before you start writing. It's easy to make mistakes. It's easy to get the measurements wrong or not quite follow. So just pause, read the question carefully, look at the diagram or the graph just for a couple of minutes, make sure that you know what it's about, and then you can start writing. So it's just really about pausing and thinking about it for a couple of minutes rather than just, you know, diving straight into the writing and then halfway through not being sure, you know, where to go because you didn't look at it carefully.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of questions from Inoka and also from Inoka as well. They're two, it's the same person. So Inoka is asking, how is writing graded? What's the weighting of the marks between task 1 and task 2? Are they both worth equal marks or is it different?
Yeah, so task 1 is worth 1/3 of the mark and task 2 is worth 2/3 of the mark. So it is more important to get a better score at task 2, but obviously if you drop a lot of marks in task 1, that's still going to affect the overall score. But that's the way it works, okay? And that's why they say spend 40 minutes on task 2 and 20 minutes on task 1.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that answers your question as well, Sandeep. How do they divide the band score for task one and task two? The same question there. Um, a question from Jithin, which is on the writing task two. Jithin is asking, could I end the introduction paragraph with the format, in this essay I shall argue, or in this essay I shall examine?
Yeah, so that's what we call an outline statement. That's a very good way to end your introduction in the task too. And you just say what you're going to do in the essay in very, very simply and very briefly, like I shall present some advantages and disadvantages before reaching a conclusion, something like that. If it's an opinion essay, or discussion essay, you can put a thesis statement, which means that you put your point of view, again, very briefly, not going into any detail, which you will then expand on in the conclusion. But yes, that's a really good way to end your introduction.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Question from Geothermai. Geothermai is asking about the impact of spelling mistakes, which we discussed, but also striking out. If you cross out a mistake, will that reduce your mark?
No, I mean, it's quite normal under exam conditions for anyone to just, cross something out, change their mind, something like that. It's not going to reduce your score. Examiners are also used to seeing all sorts of things when they do the marking, lots of crossing out, people putting arrows and stars and things like that. And they will try really, really hard to understand what you're trying to put in the order that you're trying to put it. So yeah, don't worry about that. That's not going to cause you any problems.
Yeah. Brilliant. Question from Min. Is it okay to use phrasal verbs in both tasks?
You shouldn't be using any phrasal verbs in the academic writing, in the academic module, not for task one, not for task two, okay? Because that's informal language, so you want to be sticking with the more academic equivalents, okay? The only time really where anyone would be using informal language is in the general training module if you get an informal letter in the task one.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. Inderthi is asking, can we use the same strategy for this question type as we can use for other question types? So I think maybe I can answer that one in Dirty. The structure will be similar in that you'll have a 4-paragraph structure with the introduction, the overview, and the details in 2 body paragraphs. And you can use the same number of steps, like, analyzing the data, making a plan, and then writing your introduction and overview. But the specific language that you'll use to describe the data is going to be a bit different. So yeah, it's worth checking out our webinars on those specific topics to give you an idea of the difference there. Okay. Question from Armstrong. Can we describe a linear diagram even in another upcoming webinar? But I think this is a linear diagram, right? Because it has a start point and an end point. So Armstrong, do you mean a cyclical diagram, like a kind of weather cycle or like a natural process that's a cycle? In that case, yeah, that's something we can look at in a future webinar. It might take us a little while to prepare the materials though, but keep an eye out on our website and we'll try and add one in, okay? So, question from, let's see. Good question here from Amir. Are we always supposed to write 2 body paragraphs, or is this because there were 2 processes?
Well, I think in this particular case, because there were 2 pictures, 2 processes, you do really want to split those into 2 separate paragraphs. And it's quite common, for example, with the bar charts and line graphs to get maybe 1 bar chart and 1 pie chart. And again, there you would really want to split those into two different paragraphs. The use of paragraphs is not so important in the task 1 as it is in the task 2, except for putting the overview in a separate paragraph, which is very important. So, you know, if you did put that in one paragraph, that would not necessarily be a problem. Make sure that the linking phrases are there and that they're very clear. But it's just that, you know, just sort of visually for the examiner, it's easier to see something and to read something that is broken up into more parts. So you are making it easier for the examiner to read your answer, and that is, you know, going to get you a better mark, to be honest, because, you know, they're not going to struggle to work out where anything is. So I would, you know, I would always try and split it up, but, you know, don't worry about it too much, but do put the overview in a separate paragraph. That really is important.
Yeah, definitely. And a related question from Ogechi, which is, if there are many processes, must we describe all of them in detail?
It's not going to happen that there are many processes, okay? There may be 2 processes. I have seen that. I've never seen more than 2. Much more likely you're going to get 1. If you did get 2, you would have less steps. So it would end up being the same number of steps that you would have to talk about, which can be about 10 to 12, something like that altogether, but it's not going to be more than that. And you're not going to get a whole range of processes that you have to talk about in one task 1. That it just won't happen.
Yeah. Related as well to the overview, Glenn has a good question here. Why don't I need to start with the word overall in the overview? Because I think for every other question type, we do start with overall. So it's actually a good question. We don't use it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you can, I mean, you can use overall as well with the process. It's really overall indicates an overview, but there are other words that you can use. So you might say in general, or you might say, like, for example, here, in order to, because you do have a purpose here, you do have an end product that you're looking at. So what's important is that you make it clear that it's the overview, okay? And often we use overall to do that. But when you have the process, I think you've got a bit more options there. It's just about making it clear rather than about always using the same word.
Definitely. I think we've got time for a couple more questions, so we'll try and blast through these guys before we wrap up. Question from Farshad. How can I increase my score on cohesion and coherence in task 1, apart from by using the linking words? So, yeah, good question. There are other types of cohesive devices, I guess, there.
Yeah, there are other types of cohesive devices. So rather than kind of repeating nouns or repeating ideas from one sentence to the other, you can use something called reference markers, which means that, for example, you would say this or these rather than saying the subject again, okay? Or so, for example, in doing so, we might say. So that's a very, very nice way of linking back to the previous sentence without necessarily using a linking phrase. So linking phrases are very important. In the actual IELTS band descriptors, rather than the public ones, they do specifically mention using reference markers, you know, in a band 7 as a way of making it flow better.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. Let me see. There was one more really good question here that I wanted to tackle, which is using how to use respectively in a sentence. So the issue is like, yeah, how can we use respectively, and with the punctuation as well? Where should the comma go?
Yeah, so if you compare two let's say you were comparing two countries using some kind of comparison phrase. So let's say, for example, the US produced twice as much oil as the UK, very general from there. So that's your comparison phrase. Then after that, you would put a comma or perhaps some brackets. And then you would say, 20,000 tons and 10,000 tons respectively. So that means that the 20,000 is connected to the US. So the first country you mentioned, the first number you mentioned, and the 10,000 is related to the UK. So that's the second country you mentioned and the second number you mentioned. So it always goes with the numbers, and it always goes after the phrase which is describing the relationship between those two countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a great explanation there, Annelie. It is a tricky question. I think it's another one, it's another example of a type of cohesive device as well, because it lets you, instead of repeating the subject again, you just use respectively to refer back to that. So thank you, Sky. Thank you. Goodbye. I'm glad you enjoyed the webinar. And Glenn, if you got a weird message, send it into our website. You can send it into info or hello@ieltsonlinetest.com, or send it in via our Facebook page, and one of our team will get back to you. Okay, so that is all we've got time for now. So we will wrap up for today. We have a number of webinars coming up next week on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So keep an eye out for them. If you do have any additional questions in the meantime, you can add them on our YouTube channel or to our Facebook page. So yeah, feel free to get in touch. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Annelie, for presenting. And
thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everybody. Good luck. Good luck, guys. Take care. Okay.
Best of luck. Good luck, guys. We'll see you soon. All right. Thank you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.